Yo, I don't know if anybody's been following me on social media, mostly Blue Sky and YouTube, but I've been developing a homebrew slash world building RPG system called the Tricolor D6 system. So I wanted to maybe use ChatGPT to talk a little bit about the full thing. So we're going to present the Tricolor D6 system, core rules, factions, combat, DCs, and uh, world building of Navarra, as well as both campaigns, High Fantasia, and the Firmament. We're going to go through this real quickly. This is based really off some world building that I came up with an entire planet called Navarra, which is an artificial planet that was man-made. They started with a core that is made of mostly obsidian. It is alive because they trapped an elemental inside of the core. At the bottom layers are 10 layers. At the bottom is as the core. As you go out, there's a lot of monsters. There's a farms area, agricultural area, and then closer towards the outer atmosphere, there's a lot of politics, social stuff, things like that. Due to the fact that this artificial planet for my world building is not, a legitimate planet. Movement is kind of cautious. It's kind of difficult. So I devised, instead of a D20 system, there's actually 3 D6s, each with a fixed meaning. So I usually use white, red, and black. The white, purely for movement. Red is for both combat and actions. So you think attacks, spells, skill use. And then there's a black or obsidian die for special functions. It is an option to the player, but the DM may require a black roll for weird stuff. So there is always on the black roll, there is always some kind of weird or lasting or permanent side effect from using it. So if you were to use it in combat to kind of gain some extra power, there would be lasting side effects. And if you have to pass a difficulty check, then there's going to be lasting side effects. It's real simple math on checks. There's the D6 plus the modifier has to be greater than or equal to the DC. And a DM can require more than one check. Pretty cool. Kind of a weird planet. It's hard to move around. So there are kind of 3 axes of reality here: movement, both combat and action, and the unusual. The ability scores are D&D compatible. It's just strength, dex, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. But I've changed a couple of things, or one main thing. You don't have armor class in this like Dungeons and Dragons. There's a concept called guard. Guard is like automatic whether you get hit or not during combat. And then you have the concept of armor points. Armor points. So your armor can actually be damaged. It absorbs damage, but it can break. It's saying a little bit about difficulty classes due to the D6. A little bit different. Like a 3 difficulty class is easy, 4 standard, 5 hard, 6 extreme. There's going to be skill checks. Most of the time, there are skill checks, physical or mental tasks. Now, due to the nature of this planet, there's a lot of social stuff. There's a lot of politics, things like that. So there are factions and guilds and political parties in the game. Factions, guilds, political parties. Now, all of these groups require conformity from the player. So these groups a lot of times have moral checks. Are you really following their ethics? They also have philosophical checks like belief systems, their own ideology, and then have doctrinal checks for how loyal or orthodox you are to the group. And it is kind of almost very central to gameplay, whether you're in a faction or absolutely not part of a group. The reason for that is that one of my design philosophies was surviving. It's kind of a survive at all costs kind of thing. Now, combat, there is an initiative. Is the white die plus your dexterity modifier. Everybody rolls for initiative. But the combat round, you do get to move, and generally you get one combat or action. With the black die is optional during every combat turn. During every single combat turn. Like I said, it's a special, but it does have weird effects. Guard, like I said, determines whether an attack connects. Armor points absorb damage, and the damage reduces the armor points first, then hit points. It's not that bad. I've had to do a lot to see if I can get this to work out. Death is part of the game. You can come back to life, but you may be changed. There is a sacrifice corpse mechanic that comes from a couple of things. One, if I'm playing with miniature figurines on my counter, then the corpse doesn't just disappear. Nobody just takes it away and throws it in a pile. Something has to be done with it. Well, so Sack Core adds +1 to any roll on your next round. But there can be consequences to Sack Core. It's very kind of tactical and strategic because there are consequences and it's hard to move around. The world of Navarra is a layered sky world. Gravity is super important. Belief is super important. Why is that? Due to the nature of the fact you're supposed to survive. Okay, so people who are born and raised up there in those upper levels around the pinnacle of the sky palace, around the clouds and things like that, they're not necessarily born and raised to go down into the core and come back and navigate the planet any which way they want to. It kind of mimics real life. So they have a lot of like myths up in the upper realms, upper layers. They have myths and stories about not traveling down to the core, or they may not even know about it. Ignorance is bliss, that kind of thing. Whereas down in the core and a few layers up, the people who inhabit the layers around the core usually have jobs where they have to help stabilize the gravity of the planet. So they're engineers. They use material magic quite a bit because sometimes you've got to pull some resources out of your butt to keep the planet stable. Whereas people in the upper atmosphere layers tend to use etheric magic, which involves a little bit of gravity and lightning. Navarra tends to have floating cities, descending cloud layers. Like I said, down in the core, there's an elemental, kind of like a monster boss, super high HP, that is not generally talked about, but it's trapped inside of pure obsidian, and it has to kind of be like prodded and poked to help generate power for the gravity generator, as well as kept under control and things like that. Well, I was talking about due to the necessity, this is an entire planet, survival, control, everything is so kind of a bad situation to live on an unstable planet. There are a lot of factions, there are guilds and groups and political parties. Now, you may decide to join a faction, you might try your best to survive without one, but each one of them will have a philosophy, a moral framework, and a doctrinal stance on pretty much everything. So a priest, for example, might maintain planetary stability through sacrifice. Engineers interface with the world through machines. Common folk live under the consequence of both. Faction alignment directly affects moral checks, philosophical checks. There's going to be doctrinal checks, and there's a lot of outcomes for it. You may get buffs for joining a faction. It's not just against your will. So in those campaigns, 2 campaigns, one is called High Fantasia. There's a lot of heroic stuff going on, and it focuses on discovery, adventure, monsters, and griffins as a mount, and it talks about the surface layers of Navarra up there in the clouds. The firmament is a little more philosophical and political. Down at the lower layers, focuses on society, industrialization, moral compromise, the cost of stabilizing the planet, and explores a little more about the truths of this elemental kind of holding the planet together. And so one of the problems I've had in the development, though, is ChatGPT seems to forget my design decisions, and sometimes it does not really play nice in some of these things. So I'm going to ask it, show me the core rules real quick to make sure it still remembers. And we'll go through and kind of scrutinize this. This is Tricolor D6. So, and you'll need 3 6-sided dice, white, red, and black for movement, combat, actions. You're going to have a character sheet, pencil, imagination. The ability score should be strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, charisma. Each round, every character may roll up to 3 dice in order: white for movement, red for combat actions, black die is optional. The white die kind of determines how far and how well you move. Higher rolls, better positioning or distance modifiers apply from dex or abilities. Like the guard is a big concept. Instead of armor class, we have guard and armor points. The black die is optional but powerful. There are difficulty classes. And I think it's forgetting. Remember that the black die is optional to the player, but DM can require it during checks. Things requiring checks can ask for multiple rolls from different colors. Make sure it does understand that. Got it. And it's important clarification. It just doesn't remember all the rules. The black die, critical rule. Black die is optional to the player, but not optional to the system. A player may choose to roll the black die to activate special abilities, push outcomes, or invoke magic reactions or narrative force. But there's always a risk. The DM may require a black die roll in high pressure situations, moral, philosophical, and doctrinal checks, and high stakes moments. So I'm gonna make sure it does say pretty tight. I thought it kind of came together fairly well, and checks are based on die roll plus modifier greater than or equal to difficulty class. Those are the core rules. And the last thing I'm going to say is make sure it understands and make sure that initiative is rolled before combat, because it just had some problems with that. I'll talk about a little bit about player creation. You should have stats, skills, abilities, and powers, as well as I'm borrowing cantrips and spells. from Dungeons and Dragons, and in the case of Magic user. So character creation, stats, skills, abilities, powers, cantrips, and spells for Magic users. Excellent. Here's character creation based off Tricolor D6. You're going to have ability scores or core stats. You're going to have skills where you're trained and competence. Abilities, which are class features. Powers, which are in limited use. And magic. Pretty much, if you want a cantrip, you pretty much just type it in. But the modifiers generally range from -2 to +4. You'll have some derived stats like health points. You are going to have some base armor points as well as warrant armor point, guard, and initiative modifier. Your skills, primarily for checks, are going to add to rolls. Skills applied to red die checks, white die checks, and occasionally black die checks. Some skills like athletics, acrobatics, general drill. Abilities are always on. Passive bonuses, new action. Basic stuff. Borrowing, quite a bit more. There is mana, things like that. Borrowing quite a bit more from D&D to kind of get started. And how do you roll out character stats? Let's look at what ChatGPT thinks so far. There's a standard array, 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, 8. You can roll 3d6 with maybe some rerolls. And method C is a heroic roll, where you roll 4d6 and drop the lowest die and do it 6 times, assigned freely. So generally, if you want to play more of a hero, which I recommend, you roll 4d6, drop the lowest one, assign it however you want to. Just different methods, and you'll get some modifiers, which I don't know if there's a modifier bloat at this point. Cool. And we're gonna see if we can run a test adventure with a random character real quickly to see if a couple things happen. There should be environmental effects. There should be some NPCs. So we're going to run a test adventure, ability score for a heroic roll. I ended up with just a +1 on strength, a +2 on dexterity, +1 on constitution. I got -1 on charisma. I ended up with 11 hit points. Ended up with 3 armor points. My guard is 12. I got an initiative modifier +2. Got some skills, train +1, some abilities like quick step, steel nerve. I started off with some gear. We're in the lower cloud layer ruins. While crossing a shattered sky bridge, a void thrall crawls up from below. We roll initiative. I initially start with combat. Initiative is rolled. Player goes first. Round 1, there's a white die for movement. So gain good footing on the broken bridge. DC 4, roll 3. That's a success. Red die attack. I roll 5, and then there's my modifiers. Does not beat his guard. Like I said, black die is optional. The enemy turn, there is a miss. Round 2, white die is I press forward with movement. The red die is a miss. Black die, DM requires it. The bridge cracks beneath you. Black die check. Wisdom DC 4 to avoid panic. Roll 2 is a failure. -1 the next red or white roll. Enemy turn is a miss. Round 3, hold position. Success. Final attack is DM grants +2 again for position. Still not enough for guard, but the thrall is overextended. DM rules guard reduced to 9 this round. Hit. Damage is 1d6. Got a 5. The thrall armor points 2 absorb, remaining damage 3. Thrall HP drops to 5, then collapses as it slips from the bridge. Enemy defeated. Gained a mental scar, shaken. That will clear after rest due to the black die roll. Cool. Let's run an adventure with a traditional RPG loop. Perfect. We'll run this like a traditional tabletop RPG loop where you explore, you discover, decide, roll, resolve, consequence, repeat. And still got the same character. Very vanilla right now because there's some other stuff that can be done. But I'm not kind of messing with it at this time. It says there's a collapsed bridge, a half-buried supply crate, and movement in the fog. So I want to check out the crate. Great. We proceed with the traditional RPG loop. Move toward the half-buried supply crate. Check 1. Approach it safely. So a DC of 3. The modifier is going to be a +2 from Dex and Quick Step 1, so that's a success. Check 2. Inspect it. I'm going to have a modifier. DC is 4. Modifier Wisdom, Perception, and Edge Sense. I got a success. And the DM's going to require a black pressure of consequence. Maybe because something was moving around in the fog. And I failed the black die roll. Consequence does not negate success. My breathing tightens. So my status from that failed black roll is uneasy. I got -1 on my next black die roll. And I'm going to look inside. There's 3 intact ration packs, a coil of sky silk rope, cracked signal flare, a scratch symbol. Cool. Got some supplies. I'm a little bit unsettled. and also add in occasional environmental effects. That's kind of a DM option. Not really part of the core rules or anything like that. The environment may act independently of characters, so it may require force checks. There will be stuff like wind shear, fog density, unstable ground. And I can continue. The adventure continues. Environment phase was triggered. There's a rolling cloud fog. The fog thickens and moves unnaturally, flowing against the wind. So visibility is reduced, sound is dampened. It's going to require an environment check on the black die for situational awareness. I've got a penalty of -1, and which caused me to fail the environmental check. The environmental consequence: the fog shifts around you, not randomly. You not see anything. We're now being flanked by sound. Well, the condition I'm in is fog press. First attack against you has advantage. Your next white die movement check is a DC +1. A lot of pressure. Might want to move to a higher ground. I want to move and ready weapon. Reposition plus prepare. That's going to require a white die check, which is a success. And I'm gonna ready my weapon. It requires a red die check on my strength, and situational advantage is a success. Environment response is a shape fails to fully hide as it adjusts positions below you. You hear stone scraping, a wet inhale, something learning where you are. So I can discover if I want to, so on and so forth. Let's see what combat. I'm gonna go direct into ambush. Direct ambush. We transition cleanly into combat, starting with initiative, because ambush changes how it's rolled and whether it's rolled. In the ambush context, I've got I roll initiative. The black die is required for pressure plus intent. So I got 7 on my red die plus dex. I guess it's more about the dex modifier than the die color. Enemy initiative is that I act first. My ambush benefits: for the first round only, +1 to my red die. The enemy guard is -2. The guard goes down to 9 for that first round. For some reason, it's ChatGPT is not giving me total agency during combat. So that's where I'm going to stop, and it just doesn't seem to understand how to run a homebrew. So I'm just going to type in, give me total agency during combat. And the next time I play which is maybe in a couple of days, I've got to make sure to open this exact same ChatGPT instance. Because it just doesn't seem to remember or understand everything totally. So if you watch this, click like, comment, and subscribe. Peace out.